Someone said to me recently, leadership is 59% about what you know and 51% about who you know. And while that may be true, I would suggest that it is 100% about who knows you. You are known by the Father, and also 100% dependent upon a God who knows it all. The moment I get to leadership and I think I've got this worked out is the moment I stop depending on God. But to me, cruciform leadership says, God, I do not know what to do, but my eyes are on you, says Hezekiah. God, I don't know how to shape this path, but I need you to show us how to shape it.
You're listening to the Faith and Work podcast, where we explore ways to serve God and others in our daily work to bring life and hope to workplaces and cities. Welcome to the Faith and Work podcast. I'm Joanna Meyer, Denver Institute's Executive Director of Women, Work, and Calling, and we're joined today by Ross Chapman, the Institute's CEO. Hey, Ross.
Hey, great to be with you, Joe.
We have a really fun and lively conversation today with Nicole Martin, the Chief Operating Officer of Christianity Today. She's also a keynote speaker at Women, Work, and Calling this year, and we're going to talk a lot about leadership, state of leadership in the marketplace today. But I would love to know from you, Ross, what intrigues you about getting to have a conversation like this with Nicole?
Well, Nicole's awesome. I met her when I was living in Charlotte, and I was working at an organization called Charlotte One, and she was at a church there called the Park Church, and they were a partner organization of where I was working. And I had a great opportunity to just get connected with her. She asked great questions about what we were doing and our strategy, and really questions I needed to hear as a leader. And it was just an awesome time. So I have a great memory of her impact on the work I was doing in Charlotte. And then she's had an incredible career and journey since then into greater and greater leadership roles. And she's just got incredible energy, a passion for Jesus and work. And we're going to have an awesome time talking with her today.
Yeah, it's no surprise that her leadership and influence has grown because she's a really gifted thinker and leader of people. I'm intrigued by getting to hear from her for a couple of reasons. One is that she's had a real mix of different types of roles she's filled in her career. She's been a nonprofit leader. She worked as a corporate consultant with one of the big companies with Deloitte. So she's been in corporate spaces, she's been in ministry spaces, and in her role at Christianity Today, she really has a bird's eye view of the state of faith in the church and in public life. So just truly a diverse perspective that has relevance for anyone who's listening today. So let's take a second and hear more about Nicole's bio. Reverend Dr. Nicole Massey-Martin serves as Chief Operating Officer at Christianity Today, and prior to accepting that position, she served as a Senior Vice President of Ministry Impact at the American Bible Society. She's also the founder and Executive Director of Soulfire International Ministries and has worked as a business analyst for Deloitte. Man, you've had a major career, Nicole. She has held leadership roles at the Park Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, alongside Bishop Claude Alexander, and currently serves her congregation in Calverton, Maryland, Kingdom Fellowship AME. I'm so thrilled that Nicole will be the keynote speaker at Women, Work, and Calling 2025, and she's the author of 3 books, including her most recent work, Nailing It, Why Successful Leadership Demands Suffering and Surrender, which we'll briefly touch on in today's conversation. So welcome, Nicole. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Glad to be here.
Nicole, I'm so glad to have you on this podcast. And yeah, just really excited. But we want to start with the first question. What does a COO of Christianity Today do? Tell us what your work looks like. What are you responsible for? What does that mean?
I ask myself that every day. No. It is, first of all, it's just such a joy to be with both of you and to have this time together. As Chief Operating Officer at CT, my role covers the back-end operations. So if you can think of journalism as editorial and operations, I'm on the operations side. I oversee our HR, our fundraising, our finances, our marketing and advertising and publishing elements. So I get to do the fun work of making sure you can have access to the news and the ideas that you need most.
Awesome. Well, I know that's a leadership job, and I remember meeting you in 2010 or 2011 in Charlotte. And actually, the first time we met was at a event, and you had me sit next to Bishop Claude. And I didn't know who I was really talking. I didn't know him. I was just, hey, yeah, I'm Ross. I'm new to Charlotte, you know?
Yeah.
And I think he got up and spoke at that event, and I didn't even know he was going to do that. But I remember speaking with you, and you were playing an important role at the Park Church, and it was a leadership role. It was a little bit behind the scenes. It got a little bit more in front of the scenes as well. And leadership has just kind of been a theme for you in all of your different roles. And I'm curious if you could talk to us about, you know, is that something that you noticed early on in your life? Is it something that was a passion of yours, a gifting of yours? How did you come into sort of that recognition?
Yeah, that's great. I think I've had some time to think about when did I first realize I was a leader, and I still go back to the playground. I mean, it's like the playground sets the temperature for your life. So we need to remember at 7 years old what we're doing and who does what. But on the playground, when I was growing up, it wouldn't be uncommon to see kids kind of playing in different games. And I would say, hey, guys, you want to play a game all together? So I think at a young age, I've always had a desire to bridge and to bring groups together. I remember being a kid who was frustrated by that group playing over there and that group playing over there and nobody speaking to each other. So I would try and come up with something that we could all play together. I also distinctly remember on the playground, whenever I came up with the ideas, I wanted to immediately hand it over to who else was going to be the team captain. Because while I liked, bringing the groups together and I liked coming up with a game, I didn't want to be the one leading the game. I didn't want to be the one, getting the credit on the field. So I see that now playing out in my life, even in the role that I'm playing now and also at ABS and also at the park, where there's a desire to create foundations for other people to thrive. There's a desire to ensure that teams feel equipped and ready and excited about the quote unquote game that we have to play for that particular season, but also a desire to make sure that we have a leadership transfer, a delegation, so that whether that's a team captain or at the park, making sure that the staff team felt empowered, or, at ABS, making sure that ministry leads feel like they can do their job, and at CT, making sure that the operational leads feel empowered. I feel that same sense of calling to remove barriers so that other people can thrive in a way that allows me to lead more kind of cohesively and more collaboratively than, just being only me.
Wow. I love that answer. It actually makes me think, we just did this report with Barna, and one of the pieces of data that came out of that said that only half of American workers feel like they have an advocate that's like interested in their growth and development. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking, like, that's kind of what you're doing, whether it's systems or just getting people ready to play in the game, making that possible. But just reflecting on your own leadership journey to that, like, what were some of the key factors that helped you become the kind of leader that you are today? Maybe you had an advocate, maybe it was books, maybe it was some experience, but what would you say was really foundational for shaping you into the leader you are today?
Yeah. I'd say it was definitely having the right advocates and mentors. And early on, I learned the distinction between a mentor and a sponsor. I think, you can have a lot of people that mentor you and guide you and provide kind of, wisdom on how to take your next step. But a sponsor is a person who actively opens doors for you. And I found that as a young woman leader, I was so blessed by people who sat at tables, and when the question was asked, who should we bring onto this board, into this place, God, by his grace, put my name on their heart, and they said, what about Nicole? So I know that has shaped me, because I can't sit in certain spaces or at certain tables without asking who else, God, needs to be here, because I thank God for the people who asked that question, and I came to mind. And I do think that's a fallacy about leadership. We are deceived if we think that leadership is only about skill set. No, leadership is highly relational, and it is about building the relationships. Some of them feel innocuous. Sometimes you're just sitting and you're next to somebody, like you were talking about sitting next to Claude Alexander. Sometimes it's just, you're sitting next to somebody and you're talking. The way I got involved at ABS, I was just talking to a friend, Sam, and he was like, you know what? I have an opening. Would you be interested in serving in that way? I knew Tim and Joyce I've known them since 2010. So as I was discerning what should I do with my next step, it was a casual conversation with Tim that was like, hey, have you thought about CT? So I think there is a relational element that I really hope and pray that I can embody, which begs the question, who else needs to be here? Because we need to be sponsors for people and help open doors, but especially for women. When doors are often closed, we need other people, men and women, who will help us open doors and get to places where maybe we wouldn't have gotten by ourselves.
You know, Ross, the annual Women in the Workplace report that comes out from Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg's company, and McKinsey and Company keeps showing that the biggest place where the door needs to be open is the first rung into management for women. They said it's less about glass ceilings and more about broken rungs, that like that first step and those first journeys into growing as a leader, when we aren't noticing and promoting women and coaching them into those roles, like that's going to set them back and set an organization back for a whole career.
Yeah. Well, Nicole, same side of the coin, or other side of the coin. What were some things that hindered your leadership journey? You know, were there factors that you felt like were big barriers to overcome?
Yeah. I mean, like most leaders, I'd say the biggest barrier was within myself. It's so hard to see yourself leading and thriving, especially when you think so highly of leadership. The fear of failure in my life was so real. This perfectionistic tendency, so real. The inability to really believe in myself and to doubt every single thing I said. Imposter syndrome, all of those things were real. And then I think the other thing that really was a stumbling block is the people who I thought would be sponsors, the people I invested in to help me get to the next phase, were often not the people who helped me to get there. I'll never forget, I had a conversation with a woman in ministry. I was new in ministry at the time. I was leading the young adult ministry. That's how I kind of got connected into Charlotte One. And I was so excited about leading this young adult ministry. And there was a woman who was a pastor that came and she preached at our church. And after service, I was super zealous. I was like Energizer Bunny, like jumping all around her. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to meet you. And oh, I've read everything you've ever written, and I've heard every sermon you've ever preached. And oh, would you be willing to just give me some of your time to show me what to do and tell me where to go? And I'll never forget, she, kind of chuckled and looked at me, and basically she said, I earned my stripes and you'll have to earn yours too. And it took me a long time to get past that, because I assumed that I would be sponsored and approved and appreciated by women. I assumed women are going to be the ones to help me get to the next place because women understand. But for God's will for my life, it was men who helped open those doors. Mm-hmm. And as I processed that moment with friends, I realized for some women, for some people, but definitely for some women, it took so much for them to get where they were that by the time they got there, they had nothing else to give. Like the exhaustion of getting to a place of respect meant they didn't have enough to give to the next generation so that they could be molded and mentored and maybe not have to jump all those hurdles.
Mm. I really love your gracious posture. I mean, yeah, self-awareness, leadership go together. Yeah. Like that's, but you're able to be self-aware and also aware of their experience. And be gracious in a way, that may be hard. So that was really cool.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think what you're describing is an isolated incident. It can be so easy when the wounds of your own journey harden you towards being open and generous towards others. I've heard other women share similar experiences like the first one that you did. Mm-hmm. Nicole, we would love to hear a little bit more about your new book, Nailing It. And I know at the heart of this was a real conviction that the leadership landscape has changed to such a degree that traditional leadership skills just aren't working for today's Christian leader, both for the individual and the organizations they serve. Tell us a little bit about some of the changes that you see.
One change is the assumption of a healthy workplace has changed. I'd say, and I always go back to 2019 when, life was as we anticipated it all the time. 2019, you could kind of create a little graph and say, this is where I think I'll be by 2025. 2020 happens. You're like, oh my gosh, nothing matters anymore. But also what was happening in those early 2000s was an understanding of what it looks like to have proper mental health and an understanding of what it looks like to have, in the early 2000s, what we called work-life balance, which I think needs another word. So you have this kind of collision of things. You have an entrance of an awareness of my need for mental health, which means I actually want to have a good mental state while I'm at work. You have the entrance of a disaffiliation movement in the early 2000s as well, where people are not becoming members of churches or societies or groups as much. And then by 2020, it kind of all falls apart. Stress levels increase specifically for women. The State of the Bible research shows in 2020 and 2021, women's Bible engagement statistics dipped down below men for the first time in like 10 years. Wow. You have multi-generational caring that's happening now. And so for the first time in a long time, demographic studies are showing we've got more generations alive at one time than we've previously had before. So the likelihood of somebody on your team having to care for a parent, a spouse, a child, and a grandchild is extremely high. You add to that this sense that when I come to work, I actually want to like people, or at least be liked by somebody. You know, the Gallup studies that you stay at a job when you actually have a friend. I think prior to 2019, you had a sense that people come to work, and then when you go home, that's when you can be yourself. Now we have a sense, remote life has changed that. I want to be myself at work. I actually want to be healthy at work. I want to have a friend at work. So you cannot lead in the same way. You can't just drive a team toward a goal and think, well, as long as we meet the goal, no matter who's with us, that's all that matters. We have to shift our way of leading to really attract the right talent and keep them in a place where they can be their full selves at work. So to me, that looks like acknowledging the stress and the trauma that people endure. That means making room on the job for people to fail and to learn from that. That means recognizing who you are as a leader and becoming self-aware. That means putting a missional accountability at the forefront, but not sacrificing people's individual lives. It's complicated and it's not easy, but if we don't make this change, by the time my 10 and 12-year-old get into the workforce, they're just going to be Ubering. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to Uber. They're gonna do what this next generation right now is doing and saying, I forget the traditional job, I'm just gonna hustle. Yeah. So they get 4 or 5 things going. They've got their online business, they've got their, side gig, because they just don't see how they can be their full selves in any one place.
I hear a lot of Uber drivers when I'm out speaking. I'm often catching Ubers from the airport to the hotel, and I have a conversation. I've talked to Uber drivers starting fashion lines, Uber drivers working as tech consultants. It's amazing. Right. There's a whole lot of side hustle going on. Mm-hmm. Yep. You have a powerful line in your book. You said, we've disconnected faith from discomfort and leadership from sacrifice. That's one of the themes in your book, is it's time crucify, hence the word nailing it, some of our traditional leadership practices. What have been the consequences of disconnecting faith and leadership from sacrifice?
Oh my goodness. It bothers me when I see people who believe it's possible to, quote, be famous or successful without it costing something. And I don't think that that's an isolated thing in the church. I do think it comes from a theology that overemphasizes resurrection as if there were no crucifixion. So this is the theology that your best day is next, and every day gets better and higher, and you'll be wealthier and wiser and stronger tomorrow than you were today. And while that may be true, there is also a purpose and a clarity of crucifixion that makes room for resurrection. So me understanding that my next best day is ahead is not because everything has been great and will be great. It's because God redeems even the lowest of my moments. So it grieves me that we can think you can get the resurrection crown without the trauma of the cross. The two go hand in hand. Jesus goes to the cross, redeems it, and resurrection comes as a result of that redemption. But we think, I'm just going to show up tomorrow. I'm going to do the best job I can. It's not going to cost me anything. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? Everything in life is going to cost you something, and you do not want to gain this world and its luxuries without paying a price. And if you think you're not paying a price, then you've probably already lost your soul. This is a costly endeavor. Faith is a costly thing, and leadership is costly. And I think this is why I got some pushback from my opening sentence. Leadership is meant to kill you. I'm not suggesting we should be martyrs. Lord Jesus knows. I am not suggesting that our lives are not worthwhile and, that we should just give it all up. I am saying that if we can really embrace the crucifixion process, Only then will we be able to enjoy and rejoice in the resurrection that is promised as well. So that's why I do think suffering has to be a part of leadership, because it's a part of our faith.
That's a very powerful quote. I'll just repeat it. We've disconnected faith from discomfort and leadership from sacrifice. I'm sort of, as you're talking, reflecting on how society elevates the role of an influencer or kind of fame or just status. And it is often, there's actually probably a sacrifice behind the scenes that people are making for that, but there's a chasing after sort of this glamorized leadership influencer role. And, I also recently read the biography on Eugene Peterson, Burning in My Bones. And I didn't really know too much about Pastor Eugene's life, but he spent 30 years at one church, kind of near where you are, I think. Like, that was sacrificial. If you read the book, it's not necessarily would have been his first choice of place to live or assignment, but that was where God led him and basically had him stay for 3 decades. And that is like, it wasn't super comfortable for him, and it was a sacrifice. And I think what you see in scripture and in lives like that is that's actually the people you want to like follow and learn from. Those are the leaders, right? Like, follow me as I follow Christ kind of people. So just wanted to say, like, wow, what a great way to say what's kind of going on right now in leadership and what the challenge really is.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. My name is Marcy McGovern, and I'm delighted to serve on the board of directors for Denver Institute. As a financial advisor, I have experienced and want others to experience the paradigm shift that happens when we see our everyday work as pleasing to God and as a way to love our neighbors. Programming like the Faith and Work podcast catalyzes this change, and we are just getting started. As Denver Institute pursues its mission to prepare people to serve God and others through their daily work, we look forward to seeing our workplaces and cities transformed. But that cannot happen without the support of our listeners. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard on the Faith and Work podcast, or if your life has been shaped by a Denver Institute event, the fellowship, a cohort, or our many publications, I encourage you to financially support this mission. Whether you join me as a monthly partner or give a one-time gift, your support helps workers, workplaces, and communities experience the hope and the life that Christ provides. Visit the Give page at denverinstitute.org. That's denverinstitute.org.
You introduce us to this phrase, cruciform leadership, which is leadership shaped by the cross.
Yep.
I want you to flesh that out a little bit. Like, what does that look like in daily working life and leadership?
Yeah. In short, it's a surrendered way of being. And it's important to say this is not a book written out of some point of having arrived. I haven't figured it all out, and now I'm trying to teach the underlings how to do what I do. It's a process in action. And the joy of crucifixion is that Paul says, we die daily. This is not a one and done. So a leadership style that is shaped according to the cross is one that is fully surrendered. I used to think in leadership, the moment I got to the next level, that meant I needed to have the answers, or at least I needed to know someone with the answers. And it's been told to me repeatedly, leadership is 59% about what you know and 51% about who you know. And while that may be true, I would suggest that it is 100% about who knows you. You are known by the Father, and also 100% dependent upon a God who knows it all. The moment I get to leadership and I think I've got this worked out is the moment I stop depending on God. But to me, cruciform leadership says, God, I do not know what to do, but my eyes are on you, says Hezekiah. God, I don't know how to shape this path, but I need you to show us how to shape it. And I think I know the best way forward. but I want my heart, my mind to be open to how you want me to lead. This is the difference between a leader walking into a room with a board or a team and saying, here's where we're going to go. Any questions? And a leader walking into the room and laying the plan before the people and before God. This is where I think we're going. What's missing? What are the other options? What don't we know? What can't we see? And then let's consecrate this process. And you know what that does to the people in the room? It doesn't just achieve buy-in, but it also achieves a joint kind of deep breath, because believers in workplaces desperately need to know that while they have a part to play, it is not all on them. And that is what cruciform leadership affords. It allows us to put it all on God and to say, God, I want to be used in this, but let it be what it is. And also the mistakes that will happen, the things that I didn't anticipate, the failures, even that belongs to you and can be redeemed and reshaped by you.
Yeah. To me, that feels very hopeful, because I think about the pressures that the current marketplace leader might be facing, whether it's kind of the whiplash from social ideologies being highly valued in the workplace and then suddenly being stripped out. I mean, that alone will help you feel like, what do I do? How do I love my employees in the midst of that turmoil, or fear about changes that are coming with AI? There are certain things that we really don't know, but we follow a God who loves us and does know. And so that posture of cruciformity at least helps us situate ourselves rightly in the workplace, even in the midst of all of that change.
Okay, so I would love for you to go a little bit more here. You had kind of 3 key temptations that leaders face. I know you probably talk about this a bunch in the book, so high level, but I thought these were great. And I also just want to restate something, at least how I heard what you were saying, which was, I think especially in business, and if you're in a leadership role, you are expected to know where we're going. You know, big corporation CEOs are hired with the expectation that they're going to know the plan, and they're going to be able to go do it, and they're going to make the right choices. They're going to predict all the market things. They're going to know how everybody's going to operate. And I just love that you're basically saying, like, no, actually it's surrendering to the idea that you have limited knowledge, and that the people around you have really important knowledge that needs to be brought to the table, and just a recognition that God knows all. So what a relief, but also like so much more wisdom can actually lead the thing you're involved in forward if you have that attitude. So, okay, so what would be those 3 temptations that we might want to be aware of?
Only 3. I do want to say, sometimes when I'm talking about this topic of surrender in leadership, there can be a kind of a subtle assumption that I'm suggesting that leaders are not clear, that they are not, understanding what the vision is, that they don't have a plan, that they don't want performance. No. It is possible to have a plan, to give direction, to inspire vision, to keep KPIs, as every leader should, and to hold that with an open hand before the Lord. And that's what I'm suggesting we do. So what do we need to crucify? I think we need to crucify, if I had to pick 3, goodness. We need to crucify.
Yeah, what are your 3 favorite sins from
Oh my God. Only 3. I would say
and not just sins, but pressures.
I'll reframe the question and say, what am I seeing most frequently repeated in my life and in the lives of other leaders around me? It is definitely crucifying perfection, a sense of perfectionism. I am still an overcoming perfectionist, and the issue with perfectionism isn't excellence. It's not that, we want to pursue excellence. Perfectionism is at its core a form of idolatry toward a God that does not exist. It is a worship of a standard that does not exist. And it is a sin for leaders and a problem and a stumbling block that needs to be overcome, because leaders who have an ideal of perfection not only worship it themselves, but they train their teams to worship this fictitious idea of perfection as well. The way that we are perfect is by dotting every I and crossing every T. But when you look at startups, for example, they often are aiming for just something beautiful. They're not aiming for something perfect. When you look at this is at its base, value, when you look at influencers build their platforms not on perfection, but on authenticity. So the question can't be, what does it look like for us to perfectly meet our mission? The question has to be, how can we be perfectly connected to each other, to the team, to our stakeholders, to the people that we serve, so that what comes out of that exceeds what we ever imagined. This is the joy of releasing and surrendering perfection. When I release what I think is perfect, I get to embrace what God says. And whether that is exactly what I thought or not, it is always better than what I initially imagined. So I would say perfection is one. The second, and you could argue that this kind of wraps a lot of them together, but it's ego. I think leaders need to crucify their sense of self. Now, here's what I mean, especially as a woman leader. Women often do this without thinking. We demonize ourselves. We beat ourselves up. We say that we're not worthy. We say we don't belong. So by crucifying ego, I am suggesting we have to let go of what we think we are to embrace who God says. For those with overinflated egos, that will be a humbling process. For those with underinflated egos, that will be a process of being lifted. So the question isn't, how do I lead like me? The question is, how do I lead like I'm loved by God? Because if I can lead like I'm loved by God, then I'm not looking for your approval, and I'm not worried about the haters, and I can move forward even if somebody wants to quit, because I know I'm deeply and fully loved by God. So perfection is one, ego is another. And then I would say the last one is probably the one that gets my goat the most. I do think leaders need to crucify loyalty. And what I mean is every leader loves to embrace a team of people who will, at the end of the day, nod their heads and say, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. We can do this. We want people around us who will say, you got it. No problem. I heard a leader say this yesterday. She said, I have to release some people from my team because I shared with them the vision and 8 people told me that it wasn't possible. And I said, it's time for you to go. Now, while I get that, and there are moments in our leadership where you do need that courage to discern people who cannot go with you, we also cannot continue to subscribe to a culture that cancels every idea that's not ours and that pushes away people that might want to hold us accountable. You look at the Psalms. David says he prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. What if your enemies have something to say? What if there's a perspective you need to hear? So instead of getting a team of yes people who will say yes to everything you like, what about getting a team of diverse thinkers who may have different vantage points that might actually make you better? That is the hardest thing to do. And I don't think we should get people who are insubordinate, but I do not necessarily think that we ought to cancel every person on our team that says, hey, I think you're going the wrong way, because maybe God put them there to say something that you need to hear.
Yeah.
I'm feeling super encouraged because I got lots of people on my team that tell me that all the time.
You should totally be encouraged. See, God has you in the right place.
That's right. Oh, yeah, that's a terrible idea,
to
Ross.
Like when we say stuff like that, you're willing to slow down.
Yeah, see?
And sit with it and say, okay, let's talk about this. Or like, is there a better way to say what I was trying to say? Like Ross is really like a dialogue
I know
partner
that.
in that.
And I mean, small plug for Ross. I think part of that is because you don't mind listening, even when what you hear is counter or rubs against what you believe. And I would not say that you should take a bunch of things that are going to tear you down, but the ability to listen and hear gives you the influence that you need to take it in another direction because you've heard, you've listened. But unfortunately, a lot of leaders, when they only crave loyalty, they don't listen. Because if you say something that's other than what I say, then I don't want to hear it.
Well, yeah, listening is, I think, like the first job of a leader
Yep.
for sure. And, other people might say the first job of a leader is to define reality, which I also like that a lot. But you can't define reality if you haven't listened to the people in your reality.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just your perspective on that reality. And that's going to be limited. So, well, those are really powerful things to think about, Nicole. That's
There can
really
even
good.
be a little ego in that, Ross, of like, I'm the person that defines reality for my team. I get it. It's helping understand the circumstances and interpret them, for your team. But you have to be careful with that. Even.
Yes, you do.
We're all kind of cringing at the thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want to ask a little bit about your thoughts on women and work and leadership, Nicole, because you're going to be our keynote speaker at Women Working Calling 2025. And One of the challenges that I felt as I was exploring this idea of cruciform leadership is that it invites us to a posture of surrender. And I think for women in the workplace or Christian women in some church situations, they have had to try and find a way to muscle up, or in church situations have been told to make themselves small to fit in with the cultural norms or theological norms there. How can women work in a way that's both surrendered and empowered?
There's no way to do that outside of a deep, abiding relationship with Jesus. When we abide in Jesus, the and makes more sense. We have been crucified with Christ, and the same Spirit that rose Jesus from the dead lives in us. We are broken vessels, and we are vessels so that the all-surpassing power is of God and not of us. There's, we're perplexed and not persecuted. I mean, we won't have to preach the scriptures, but the and is what makes us followers of Jesus Christ, because I die to myself and yet I'm made alive through Christ. And when I can embrace that, then I don't mind the times in my life where the tensions are real. If I can embrace this tension in Christ of being both dead and alive at the exact same time, then I can go through hardships and recognize that this is but a momentary trial, because the cross already teaches me that resurrection will come. So for me, if I had to think of an example of what this looks like, I'd say this is a woman who's sitting on a team, who knows that she's the smartest person on the team, knows that she has the most to offer on the team, and yet second guesses when the question is asked at the table, what should we do? To that woman, the and looks like you are smart and capable, and you will find the right way to speak the words that you need to speak to the right people at the right time. You are gifted, you are called, you are at the table, and you can be humble enough to offer your idea in a way that no one else has offered it before. For me, the and as a woman in leadership shows up in being able to say, I can speak my truth at this table, and I can hold it lightly if it turns out that I'm wrong. But what it doesn't look like is sitting on one side or the other. It cannot be, I sit at the table, I'm the smartest person, I'm the most capable person, but because I'm afraid to speak, I remain silent. And it cannot be, I'm the smartest person, I'm the most capable person, to let me dominate and tell the room who I am. Like, the and says, I can be wise as a serpent and gentle as a dove because of Christ. So it all comes back to, what is your relationship with God? How do you cling to the cross so that what comes from you is a representative of the God you serve?
Oh, I'm really delighted because, our event theme is embracing the and before we hit record, Nicole and I were talking about her talk at the event, and I introduced some of those themes and ideas to you, and you just took it and you gilded that lily. Like, you brought the glory of Scripture into the reality of working life, and that is just such a beautiful thing. Russ, I have a final question, but I want to make space too if you have any thoughts that you want to hear from Nicole about, like, women in work.
Well, probably I need to hear a lot of them. I'm not sure I have the best questions. So maybe just let me represent a gendered perspective.
Yeah,
So
bring it.
what are the questions that a man in a leadership role with women on his team that he knows are super wise, capable, what questions should be on that person's mind
Amen.
that maybe aren't coming to mind?
I mean, the first question is, who's my successor? Which of these women is capable of taking over when, not just when I die? I mean, I think one of the worst things you could say to a woman is, you're my hit by a bus plan, because what that says is, I'm only coming to you if something happens to me. But there needs to be an intentional question in the mind of every male leader leading predominantly women teams: who in this women-led team will follow me, and how do I bring her close? And there's so many reasons why men don't ask that question. I had somebody say to me, I was looking for the Joshua, and you're not the Joshua, you're the Joshua Ed. Like,
Yeah.
what does that mean?
Oh, that's awful.
But what he was saying was,
actually, her name was Deborah.
thank you. Hello, her name was JL, if we want to be specific.
Yeah.
But there's this cultural norm that men in leadership ought to find sons to follow them and find other men to follow them.
Amen.
But there are unique times when God is calling a woman to follow you. So the question is, who is it, Lord? And how do I shape this woman in leadership? The other reason why men don't ask that question is because they have this traditional view of apprenticeship in mind. They think, well, if I'm going to raise and groom the next leader, well, they got to come with me to conferences. They got to travel with me. They got to sit with me in meetings. And how awkward would that be? And we're going to be riding in the car together. And what will people think?
With me.
Yeah, exactly. But might she not be interested in you? And might that not be a variable? And might your limited thinking be a limitation, not just for her, but for you? So they have to ask the question, who else on this team is equipped and ready to lead?
Okay, I'm going to give you the last question. It's a little bit meta, but it relates to women and work and leadership in public life.
Yeah.
Why are women vital to a hopeful future of God at work in our workplaces, industries, and cities? That's one of those $1 million questions. You gave me $1 million question when I was on your podcast, so I'm giving you one.
I mean, the only thing that comes into my mind is like the Joel scripture, in the last days I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, my sons and my daughters. Why are women vital? Because women also carry the Spirit of God. And to mute the voices of women, to limit the leadership capacities of women, is to mute or to limit the voice of God. And I want the fullness of God at work in my life and in my work in every way. So I seek the balance. I think that's one of the joys of women in leadership, by the way, because we've been raised in a society that teaches us that we're only as good as the partners we have. We are highly partnered people, highly collaborative. We have no problem saying, I can't do this by myself. I need somebody else with a different skill set that looks different, sounds different, acts different to do things I can't do. So women are vital for our vantage points, for our perspectives, for our unique giftings and skill sets, not less than or better than, but necessary. And women are necessary because God says so. Why do we need to write a whole discourse on the value of women? If God said it, that's it.
I love it. And that's the heart of what God's doing in Women Working Calling, is we want women's hearts to be alive with the gospel and the scope of it in every corner of creation, and wholeheartedly bringing their full selves to that journey of joining God and bringing hope and life to those spaces. So why wouldn't we want women there? So absolutely, it's really exciting. I cannot wait for our community to learn from you at the annual event. And I hope our podcast listeners have been inspired. In today's show notes, we will put a link to your book, Nailing It. To learn more, we'll put information about Women Working Calling 2025. And I would challenge our listeners to say, what about today's conversation, this idea of cruciform leadership, has piqued some interest in your life? Is there a specific area of the way that you work that needs to be surrendered and crucified? And what might God do through that process? So what is that for you, is my question for you. Thanks for joining us, Nicole. And we'll see you in person in Denver in a few weeks.
I can't wait.
If you've enjoyed this episode of the Faith and Work podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend. The Faith and Work podcast is produced by Denver Institute. We believe that when Christians work faithfully, the world will taste the hope and life that Jesus provides. To learn more or to make a financial contribution, visit denverinstitute.org.